The cigar smell hit me the moment Sloane walked through our front door at 11:30 on a Tuesday night. Not just any cigar, expensive Cuban tobacco that cost more per stick than most people spend on lunch. My wife didn't smoke. Hell, she couldn't even stand the smell of my occasional cigarette on the back porch. "How was the property inspection?" I asked from my drafting table, where I'd been pretending to work on blueprints for the Henderson renovation. In reality, I'd been sitting there for 3 hours, nursing a whiskey and waiting for exactly this moment. Sloane froze in the doorway like a deer caught in headlights. Her lipstick was gone, her hair slightly mussed despite what looked like a hasty attempt to fix it in the car. She clutched her designer purse against her chest like armor. "It ran long," she said, not meeting my eyes. "You know how these old Victorian houses are. So many hidden problems." I nodded slowly, taking another sip of whiskey. "Hidden problems. Yeah, I'm starting to understand those pretty well myself." She disappeared upstairs without another word. I heard the shower running for 20 minutes, long enough to wash away evidence, I supposed. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd spent 15 years designing homes for other people while my own marriage crumbled from the inside out. "My name is Brooks Danner, and I'm an architect in this godforsaken lakefront city that thinks it's Milwaukee but acts more like Mayberry with delusions of grandeur. I design houses for rich people who want to show off their money, and apparently, I married a woman who wanted to sample what those rich people had to offer. The signs had been there for months, late nights that turned into overnight trips, new lingerie that I never got to see her wear, a sudden interest in expensive restaurants and wine bars that she claimed were client meetings. Sloane had always been ambitious. It's what attracted me to her in the first place. But this was different. This was hunger. 3 days later, I found the burner phone. I wasn't snooping, not really. Sloane had asked me to grab her gym bag from the car because she'd forgotten her protein powder. Simple enough request from a wife to a husband. Except when I unzipped the side pocket to look for the powder, my fingers found something else entirely. A cheap flip phone, the kind you buy at gas stations when you don't want your calls traced. The kind you buy when you're planning something you don't want discovered. My hands shook as I opened it. 17 missed calls from D over the past week. Text messages that made my stomach turn. Messages about hotel rooms and afternoon meetings and how much better D was at certain things than that boring husband of yours. I sat in my car in our driveway for 30 minutes, reading through months of correspondence between my wife and this mystery man. The details were explicit enough to make me nauseous and specific enough to leave no doubt about what had been happening during all those late-night property inspections. But it was the most recent exchange that really got to me. D. "When are you going to leave him?" Sloane. "Soon. He's so pathetic, he probably wouldn't even fight for me." D. "Good. I'm tired of sneaking around. You deserve better than some failed architect who designs cookie-cutter houses." Failed architect, cookie-cutter houses. I'd won 3 state design awards in the past 5 years, but apparently, that wasn't impressive enough for my wife's new standards. I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it and walked into our house, the house I'd designed myself, with custom millwork and hand-selected materials and enough hidden storage to make a magician jealous. Sloane was in the kitchen, making herself a salad and humming some tune I didn't recognize. "Find the protein powder?" she asked without looking up. "Yeah," I said. Found exactly what I was looking for. That night, I started planning. Not revenge, not yet. Just information gathering. I needed to know who D was before I could figure out what to do about him. It didn't take long. Sloane's recent client list was on her laptop, and she'd never been particularly careful about passwords. Her birthday, like always, Dale March, local developer, married, 3 kids, and a reputation for buying up historic properties and turning them into overpriced condos. I'd actually met him a few times at city planning meetings. Pompous bastard who wore $1,000 suits and drove a classic Mustang that he treated like a religious artifact. More importantly, He was married to Vivian March, a woman who'd inherited more money than God and had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless when crossed. Suddenly, I had an idea that went far beyond simple revenge. I started following them, not stalking, just observing. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons at the Riverside Hotel, Friday evenings at Dale's mansion when his wife was at her book club, Saturday mornings at a little bed and breakfast outside town that specialized in discreet accommodations. They weren't careful. They were sloppy and arrogant and so convinced of their own cleverness that they never bothered to check if anyone was watching. Dale would pull up in his precious Mustang, Sloane would meet him in the parking lot, and they'd disappear into whatever room he'd rented for the afternoon. It was during one of these surveillance sessions that I met Vivian March for the first time. I was sitting in my truck across from the Riverside Hotel, watching Dale's car in the parking lot when someone tapped on my passenger window. I nearly jumped out of my skin. She was stunning in that cold, calculated way that only comes from good genes and better plastic surgery. Blonde hair pulled back in a perfect chignon, wearing a coat that probably cost more than my truck. But it was her eyes that got my attention, ice blue and absolutely furious. "You're Brooks Danner," she said when I rolled down the window. It wasn't a question. "Depends on who's asking. The wife of the man who's currently screwing your wife in room 237. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Mind if I join you? I think we have some things to discuss." Vivian March climbed into my truck like she owned it, settling into the passenger seat with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no in her entire life. She smelled like expensive perfume and old money, a combination that should have been intimidating, but somehow wasn't. "How long have you known?" she asked, cutting straight to the point. "About a week. You?" 6 months. She stared at the hotel entrance where our respective spouses were presumably engaged in their weekly betrayal. "I hired a private investigator initially. Then I started following them myself. It's become something of a hobby." I studied her profile. There was something almost predatory in the way she watched the building, like a hawk circling prey. "Why haven't you confronted them?" "Because confrontation is for amateurs." She turned to look at me, those ice blue eyes calculating. "Tell me, Mr. Danner, what do you know about my husband's business practices?" "He buys old buildings and turns them into expensive condos. Makes a lot of money doing it. He also cuts corners on construction, bribes city inspectors, and has been skimming money from his investors for years. The only reason he hasn't been caught is because he's very good at making friends in the right places." She paused. "Friends like your wife, who's been helping him identify undervalued properties and fast-track permits." That hit me like a punch to the gut. Sloane wasn't just cheating on me. She was actively helping Dale in what sounded like fraud. "How do you know all this?" "Because I've been documenting everything for months. Financial records, recorded conversations, photographs of code violations at his construction sites. I have enough evidence to destroy him completely." She smiled that cold smile again. "The question is whether you're interested in helping me do it. What's in it for me? Your wife loses her real estate license, her reputation, and any claim to your assets in the divorce. Dale loses his business, his money, and quite possibly his freedom. And we both get to watch them realize that they traded their marriages for absolutely nothing." I had to admit, it sounded appealing. "What did you have in mind?" "Patience, planning, and a willingness to let them think they're winning right up until the moment we destroy them." She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. "Think about it. Call me when you're ready to stop being a victim." She climbed out of my truck and walked away without looking back, leaving me sitting there with her card and a head full of possibilities. That night, Sloane came home at her usual time, full of stories about difficult clients and property showings that ran late. I nodded and smiled and played the part of the oblivious husband while she spun her lies with practiced ease. "How was your day?" she asked, the same question she'd asked every night for 15 years. "Productive," I said. I think I'm finally ready to start that big project I've been planning." She wasn't really listening, already focused on her phone and whatever messages were waiting from her lover. But I meant every word. The next morning, I called Vivian. "I'm in," I said when she answered. "Excellent. Meet me at Cafe Luna at 2 o'clock. Come alone and bring your wife's laptop if you can manage it without arousing suspicion." Cafe Luna was the kind of place where rich women met to plan charity galas and complain about their housekeepers. Vivian fit right in, sitting at a corner table with perfect posture and a cup of tea that probably cost more than most people's lunch. I slid Sloane's laptop across the table. Her password is her birthday. She's not very creative. Most cheaters aren't. Vivian opened the laptop and began typing with the efficiency of someone who knew exactly what she was looking for. "Your wife has been very busy. Look at this." She turned the screen toward me. Email chains between Sloane and Dale going back 8 months, discussing properties, permits, and payoffs, references to cash payments, and under-the-table deals that made my skin crawl. "She's been taking money," I said, reading over the messages. "Quite a lot of money. Dale pays her a percentage of every deal she helps him close, completely separate from her legitimate real estate commissions. The IRS would be very interested in this income that she's failed to report." I felt sick. The woman I'd married, the woman I'd trusted with my life and my future, wasn't just unfaithful. She was a criminal. "There's more," Vivian said, clicking to another folder. Photos of code violations at Dale's construction sites, safety issues that could have ruined people. Your wife documented everything, probably as insurance against Dale if he ever tried to cut her out. She's been building a case against him? Or protecting herself? Either way, she's given us everything we need to destroy both of them. Vivian closed the laptop and leaned back in her chair. "The question is how we want to play this. We could go to the authorities right now and let the legal system handle it, but that's messy and uncertain. Or we could be more creative." "What kind of creative?" "The kind that ensures they lose everything that matters to them before they lose their freedom, their reputations, their relationships, their sense of security. We make them pariahs in their own community, and then we let the law finish what we started." I thought about Sloane's text messages, about her calling me a failed architect, about the months of lies and deception. "What do you need me to do?" "For now, nothing. Go home, act normal, and wait for my signal. I'm going to start planting seeds, spreading just enough truth to make people start asking questions. When the time is right, we'll give them something to really talk about." Over the next 2 weeks, I watched Vivian work with the precision of a surgeon. She started small, a comment here, a question there, all delivered with the innocent curiosity of a concerned citizen. She attended city council meetings and asked pointed questions about permit approvals. She showed up at Dale's construction sites and wondered aloud about safety protocols. Meanwhile, I played my part perfectly. The devoted husband who trusted his wife completely, even as she continued her affair with increasing boldness. Sloane started staying out later, making less effort to hide her absences, confident that she had me completely fooled. She had no idea that I was documenting everything. Photos of her car at the hotel, screenshots of her text messages, bank statements showing the mysterious cash deposits she thought I hadn't noticed. But it was Vivian who delivered the masterstroke. She threw a charity gala at the country club, one of those elaborate affairs that the local elite used to see and be seen. Dale and Sloane attended together, not even bothering to pretend they weren't a couple. I watched from across the room as they danced and laughed and played the part of successful, attractive people who deserved each other. That's when Vivian made her move. She cornered Rochelle Patterson, Sloane's business partner, and the biggest gossip in the real estate community. Within an hour, half the party was whispering about Dale's questionable business practices and Sloane's sudden financial success. Nothing actionable, nothing that could be traced back to Vivian, just enough doubt to start the avalanche. By the end of the week, Dale's investors were asking uncomfortable questions. The city building inspector was taking a much closer look at his construction sites, and Sloane was starting to panic. "People are talking," she said one night, pacing around our kitchen like a caged animal. "There are rumors about Dale's business, about our relationship. Someone's been spreading lies." "What kind of lies?" I asked, not looking up from my blueprints. "It doesn't matter. They're lies." But her voice shook when she said it, and I could see the fear in her eyes. The trap was set. All we needed now was the right moment to spring it. The moment came 2 weeks later, on a Thursday afternoon that started like any other. I was in my home office working on plans for a lakefront cottage when I heard Sloane's car in the driveway. She was home early, which was unusual, and I could hear her on the phone before she even made it to the front door. "I don't care what your wife suspects," she was saying, her voice sharp with panic. "We need to be more careful. People are asking questions." I minimized my computer screen and pretended to be absorbed in my drawings as she burst through the front door. Her face was flushed, her hair disheveled, and she clutched her phone like a lifeline. "Brooks," she called out, "we need to talk." I walked into the living room to find her pacing back and forth, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors I'd installed myself 3 years ago. She looked like a woman on the edge of a breakdown. "What's wrong?" I asked, playing the concerned husband perfectly. "Someone's been spreading rumors about me, about my business practices. I think someone might be trying to sabotage my career." "That's terrible. Any idea who might do something like that?" She stopped pacing and stared at me with wild eyes. "It has to be someone who knows about my client relationships. Someone with access to information about my deals." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe you're not as clueless as you pretend to be." Her voice was getting louder, more aggressive. "Maybe you've been snooping around, asking questions, trying to make me look bad." "Sloane, that's crazy. Why would I—" "Because you're jealous," she screamed. "You're jealous that I'm successful while you're stuck designing boring houses for boring people. You can't stand that I found someone who appreciates what I have to offer." There it was. The admission I'd been waiting for, delivered with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. I felt something cold and calculating settle in my chest. "Someone?" I asked quietly. She realized her mistake immediately. I could see it in her eyes, the way they widened with panic, but it was too late to take it back. "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." I walked over to my desk and pulled out the manila envelope I'd been keeping there for weeks. "You meant exactly what you said." Her face went white as I dumped the contents onto the coffee table. Photos of her car at the hotel, screenshots of text messages, bank statements highlighting the mysterious deposits. "You bastard," she whispered. "You've been spying on me." "I've been protecting myself. There's a difference." She stared at the evidence for a long moment, and I could see her mind racing, trying to figure out how to spin this in her favor. When she looked up, her expression had changed from panic to rage. "Fine," she said. "You want to play games? Let's play games." She stormed out of the room and returned a few minutes later with her own envelope. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "You think you're so smart, Brooks. You think you've caught me in some terrible crime. But you're forgetting something important." She opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of photographs, slamming them down on the table with enough force to scatter my evidence across the floor. "You'll beg on your knees for forgiveness," she screamed, pointing at the photos. "I know about your affair, too." I looked down at the pictures she'd thrown at me. They showed me having dinner with a beautiful blonde woman at an upscale restaurant downtown. We were leaning across the table deep in conversation, looking for all the world like lovers sharing an intimate moment. For a split second, I almost admired her resourcefulness. She'd been watching me just as carefully as I'd been watching her, documenting my meetings with the same methodical precision I'd used to document her affair. But then I started laughing. It started as a chuckle, low in my throat, but it grew until I was doubled over with laughter that bordered on hysteria. Sloane stared at me like I'd lost my mind, which only made me laugh harder. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she demanded. "That's your lover's wife," I said, wiping tears from my eyes. "We were discussing our divorces." The color drained from her face so quickly, I thought she might faint. She picked up one of the photos with trembling hands, staring at it like she was seeing it for the first time. That's Vivian March," she whispered. "Yes, it is. And she knows everything, Sloane. Every hotel room, every cash payment, every corner you and Dale cut to make your dirty money. She's been documenting your affair for months, and she's been very thorough." Sloane sank into the nearest chair, the photos falling from her nerveless fingers. Oh God, what have I done?" "You've destroyed your marriage, your career, and quite possibly your freedom. But hey, at least you had some good contact along the way, right?" She looked up at me with desperate eyes. "Brooks, please, we can work this out. I made a mistake, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling, start over." "No," I said simply. "We can't." My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and smiled. "Dale's trying to call you," I said. "Apparently, Vivian just served him with divorce papers, and he's panicking. She's claiming half his assets, including the properties he bought with money he embezzled from his investors. He's going to need all the friends he can get." Sloane's phone started ringing. Dale's name flashed on the screen, but she didn't answer. She just stared at it like it was a poisonous snake. "Answer it," I said. "I'm sure he has lots of comforting words for you right about now." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I can't deal with this." "You're going to have to, because this is just the beginning." The phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. This time, it was Rochelle, probably calling with gossip about Dale's sudden legal troubles. Then it was Sloane's boss at the real estate agency, likely wondering why his star agent was suddenly the subject of whispered conversations and pointed questions. "Make it stop," Sloane whispered. "Please, Brooks, make it stop." "I can't do that. This train left the station the moment you decided I was too boring for your tastes." I gathered up my evidence and put it back in the envelope. "But I can tell you what happens next." She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "Tomorrow, you're going to get a visit from the IRS. They're going to want to know about all those cash deposits you forgot to report. Next week, the State Real Estate Board is going to start an investigation into your business practices, and sometime in the near future, you're going to be arrested for conspiracy to commit fraud." "You can't do this to me." "I'm not doing anything to you. You did this to yourself." I stood up and looked down at her, this woman I'd once loved more than life itself. "I'm just making sure you face the consequences." Her phone rang again. This time she answered it, probably hoping for some kind of salvation. "Dale?" Her voice was barely a whisper. I could hear him shouting on the other end of the line, his voice high with panic and rage. Something about lawyers and assets, and how this was all her fault for being careless. Sloane listened for about 30 seconds before hanging up. When she looked at me again, there was nothing left in her eyes but defeat. "He's cutting me loose," she said. "He says I'm a liability." Shocking. It's almost like he's not the honorable man you thought he was. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal documents, angry phone calls, and social exile that was more complete than anything I could have engineered myself. Word spread through our small city with the speed and efficiency of a plague, carried by the same gossip network that had once celebrated Sloane's success. Rochelle was the first to distance herself, dissolving their business partnership with a tersely worded letter that cited irreconcilable differences in professional ethics. Sloane's boss at the real estate agency was more direct. She was fired via email on a Tuesday morning, with instructions to clean out her desk and surrender her company car by the end of the day. I watched it all unfold from the comfort of my home office, sipping coffee and working on blueprints while my wife's world crumbled around her. She'd moved into the guest bedroom after our confrontation, claiming she needed space to think. In reality, I think she was afraid to be alone with me in our bedroom, afraid of what I might say or do in the darkness. Dale's situation was even worse. Vivian's divorce filing had triggered an avalanche of investigations that revealed the full scope of his corruption. The FBI raided his offices on a Wednesday morning, carrying out boxes of documents while news cameras rolled. By Thursday, his investors had filed a class action lawsuit. By Friday, he was facing federal charges for wire fraud and tax evasion. The irony wasn't lost on me that my wife had chosen to destroy our marriage for a man who was about to spend the next decade in federal prison. "I need money," Sloane said one morning, standing in the doorway of my office like a ghost of her former self. She'd lost weight, and her clothes hung loose on her frame. Her hair was unwashed, and she had dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. "For what?" "A lawyer. The state real estate board wants to revoke my license, and the IRS is demanding documentation for income I can't explain. I need legal representation." I leaned back in my chair and studied her. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a successful real estate agent with expensive tastes and a lucrative side business. Now she looked like a homeless person who'd wandered into the wrong house. "What makes you think I'd help you pay for a lawyer?" "Because we're still married. Because I'm still your wife, whatever else has happened." "Are you?" I asked. "Because I have divorce papers that say otherwise." Her face crumpled. "Brooks, please. I know I made mistakes." "Mistakes?" I stood up and walked over to where she stood. "Sloane, you didn't make mistakes. You made choices. You chose to have an affair. You chose to take money under the table. You chose to help a criminal defraud his investors. Those weren't mistakes. They were deliberate decisions." "I was in love," she whispered. "No, you were greedy. There's a difference." She started crying then, the kind of ugly, desperate sobs that come from someone who's finally realized how completely they've destroyed their life. I felt a moment of pity for her, remembering the woman I'd married 15 years ago, before ambition and dissatisfaction had turned her into someone I didn't recognize. But the moment passed quickly. "I'll give you $5,000, I said. "That should be enough to hire a public defender for the criminal charges. As for the civil suits, you're on your own." She looked up at me with desperate hope. "Thank you. Brooks, thank you so much. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it because I don't want to be married to a convicted felon when this goes to trial. Take the money, hire a lawyer, and sign the divorce papers. Those are my conditions." She nodded frantically. Yes, whatever you want. I'll sign anything." The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. Sloane got nothing. No alimony, no property settlement, no claim to my business or retirement accounts. Her lawyer had advised her to fight for a more equitable distribution, but she was in no position to negotiate. With criminal charges pending and her assets frozen by federal investigators, she was lucky to walk away with her personal belongings. I kept the house, the cars, and our savings. More importantly, I kept my reputation and my freedom. Dale wasn't so fortunate. His trial made national news, a cautionary tale about greed and corruption in small-town America. The prosecution painted him as a predator who'd used his charm and connections to steal millions from investors who'd trusted him with their life savings. Sloane testified against him as part of her plea agreement, detailing their affair and the illegal payments he'd made to secure her cooperation. He was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $47 million in restitution. Since his assets had been seized and liquidated, he'd be paying that debt for the rest of his life. Sloane got 18 months in minimum security prison and 5 years probation. She also lost her real estate license permanently and was ordered to pay back taxes and penalties that would keep her in debt for decades. Vivian March came out of the whole affair remarkably well. As the innocent spouse, she was able to claim a significant portion of Dale's assets before they were seized by the government. She also received a substantial settlement from the insurance company that had bonded Dale's business. Last I heard, she'd moved to California and was living very comfortably on her ill-gotten gains. I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for any of them. 6 months after Sloane's sentencing, I was sitting in my favorite restaurant, celebrating the completion of my latest project, a custom home for a tech executive who'd made his fortune in Silicon Valley and wanted a retreat on our lake. It was the kind of challenging, creative work that reminded me why I'd become an architect in the first place. I was reviewing the final invoices when someone approached my table. I looked up to see Detective Ray Morrison, a guy I'd known since high school who'd been one of the investigators on Dale's case. "Brooks," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Mind if I join you?" "Not at all. How's the family?" "Good, good. Kids are getting big." He paused, studying my face. "I wanted to talk to you about something. Off the record." I felt a familiar chill in my stomach. "What about?" "Your ex-wife's case. Dale March's case. The whole thing." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I've been a cop for 20 years, Brooks. I've seen a lot of cases, a lot of investigations, and I have to tell you, this one was almost too clean." "What do you mean?" "I mean, everything fell into place perfectly. Too perfectly. The evidence was exactly where we needed it to be, when we needed it to be there. The witnesses were cooperative, the documentation was comprehensive, and the timeline was airtight." He paused. "It's like someone had been planning this for months." I took a sip of my wine, keeping my expression neutral. Sometimes the bad guys just get sloppy. Maybe. Or maybe they had help getting sloppy. He leaned back in his chair. "Vivian March is an interesting woman. Very smart, very well connected, very good at getting what she wants. She also had access to Dale's business records, his personal files, his financial information." "Are you suggesting she set him up?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just saying that if someone wanted to destroy Dale March, they couldn't have done it more efficiently than his own wife did." Morrison smiled. "Of course, she'd need help. Someone on the inside, someone with access to the other players in this little drama." I met his gaze steadily. "What exactly are you asking me, Ray?" "I'm asking if you're proud of yourself." The question hung in the air between us for a long moment. I thought about Sloane, sitting in her prison cell, probably wondering how her life had gone so wrong so quickly. I thought about Dale, learning to appreciate the simple pleasures of institutional food and communal showers. I thought about all the investors who'd lost their savings, all the families whose lives had been destroyed by greed and betrayal. "Yes," I said finally. "I am." Morrison nodded slowly. "Good. They deserved everything they got." He stood up and tossed a 20 on the table. "Dinner's on me. Consider it a thank you for helping clean up our city." He walked away without another word, leaving me alone with my wine and my thoughts. That night, I sat on the deck of my house, the house I'd designed and built with my own hands, the house that was now entirely mine, and watched the sun set over the lake. The water was calm, reflecting the orange and pink sky like a mirror. It was peaceful in a way that I hadn't experienced in years. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Vivian, who was now living in Malibu and apparently thriving in her new life. "Saw the news about your latest project. Beautiful work. Hope you're well. V." I typed back, "Thriving. Thanks for everything." Her response came immediately. "Thank you. We made a good team." I deleted the conversation and put my phone away. There was no point in maintaining contact with Vivian. We'd accomplished what we'd set out to do, and now it was time to move on with our separate lives. The truth was, I didn't feel guilty about what we'd done. Sloane and Dale had made their choices, and we'd simply ensured that they faced the consequences of those choices. If we'd been more efficient and thorough than the justice system typically was, well, that was just good planning. I poured myself another glass of wine and watched a pair of loons glide across the water. Tomorrow, I had a meeting with a potential new client, a young couple who wanted to build their dream home on a lot overlooking the lake. It would be challenging work, the kind that required creativity and vision and attention to detail, the kind of work I was very good at. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I thought about the future. I was 40 years old, financially secure, and finally free from the burden of a marriage that had been slowly poisoning my life for years. I had my work, my house, and my reputation intact. Most importantly, I had the satisfaction of knowing that justice had been served, even if it hadn't come through traditional channels. I raised my glass to the night sky, toasting the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. To new beginnings, I said aloud, my voice carrying across the water. Somewhere in the distance, a loon called out in response, its haunting cry echoing across the lake like a benediction. I finished my wine and went inside, locking the door behind me. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new possibilities for the future. But tonight, I was content to sit in my perfectly designed house, surrounded by the fruits of my labor and the knowledge that sometimes the good guys really do win, even if they have to become the villains to do it.